All right, so someone requested some information on how I have these little dialog windows that you can drag around. And so here's some code that gets that done. And let's walk through how it works. So this is the function that does the dragging, etc. It is this main function called drag element, and then it has some sub-functions within it, which could exist outside of the main function, and they could be called upon, but this is the way it's organized. Instead of talking through this function right now, let's look at how the HTML is generated. So first thing, we declare this test function. This if statement basically is checking to see if this ID exists, and if so, it deletes it before it starts generating a new element with that same ID. And this is just some code that I use to generate HTML in JavaScript. This is my custom stuff. You don't have to use this, but this is how I do it. So this a function basically is a function that allows me to pass an element as well as a two-dimensional array with key value pairs, the key being the attribute name that I want to assign to the element, and the value being the value of that attribute. So here I'm passing through an ID with its name, and then I'm styling it using inline HTML styling. One thing to note if you want to use this drag is that your parent element, the element that you want to move around, needs to be a fixed position element. So make sure that you have that CSS defined. You do not have to do it like I'm doing here, but you do need to define it that way, be it in your CSS or if you're doing it within the HTML itself. And then you'll want to give it a position, somewhere visible on the page. I'm doing just 100 pixels from the top and 100 pixels from the left. And then z-index is also important. You want it to have a high z-index, because if it doesn't, it may end up being behind a lot of the elements on the page. And I found the most efficient way to ensure that your z-index is at the top is to get the current date and timestamp, and then you're sure that if you always use this as a practice, that whatever you're loading in that given moment will be loaded on top, right? All right. This next set is the header. So this would be the black space here. This is where I'm actually going to assign the event listener for the drag element function. Then this other stuff is just the text, so test header, the close button, and I'm assigning a little event listener on click to delete the element when I click on it. And then finally, this is the body of the where I would put stuff. So the head and then the body itself. All right, so let's look at how this works. We assign the on mouse over event listener to drag element, and then what this does is we take this, which is the header in this case, and we get the parent element. And so in that case, this is going to be that container. However, if you want it to operate differently, so if you want anywhere you click on the item to be draggable, then you would put it elsewhere. You need to think through how you want it. I like to have a header on mine, and so this is how I run it, to where only if I'm moused over the header element will this initiate, right? So I assign it this variable L, just arbitrary thing. I set the base positions that it's starting from, and then this, you don't really need to know how all this works. I mean, go look it up. This is all vanilla JavaScript stuff, so it's all in the Mozilla client or the Mozilla documentation. But anyway, yeah. So when you hover over it, everything's initiated, and then we assign another event listener, which is on mouse down. Oh, one other thing that's important. It is important that you have an ID associated with this, because If you don't, actually, never mind. It's not important. I forgot that. That's why I have this else condition. Yeah. Anyway, so then it initiates the drag mouse down. So when you are clicking mouse down, it assigns these, goes through, yada yada. I said I wasn't going to go through it all, so I'm not going to. But that's essentially how it works. One thing you'll notice is the opacity changes on this when I'm moving it. See, you can see through it. This is done here. So if you wanted it to be more transparent, you could put it at like 0.35 and it would be very transparent, right? And then when you let go, it puts it back to the full opacity. You could also change the milliseconds to where it's a faster transition if you so chose to do. So anyway, that is how it works. Again, this is the main code that you're going to want, and you assign it using the on mouse over event listener. You can write event listeners a couple different ways, so keep that in mind. If you have any questions on that, see the Mozilla documentation. All right.